Start the recording. Who's the?
Okay. So today we'll be walking through the process of instrumenting an application which is deployed in GitLab. So for this demo, we'll use the Tanooki Inc. Project. I'll share my screen. So can everyone see this?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so I forked the Tanooki Inc. project into my under my username. So if anyone is not familiar with this, this is a simple application which allows you to generate sentry errors. So let me run it on my local system. I've already forked it on my, I've already cloned it on my local system. So yeah, it's updated. So on your local, you can run it like this. Now it should be available on localhost 3000. So yeah, you can see it's a very simple demo project. So what we'll be doing is we'll be adding metrics to track how long this server takes to respond for this page, since there is only one page in this project. Okay, so first step is to first step will be to add metrics to our project, and the project has to um, export metrics in the format that Prometheus accepts. So we'll look at Prometheus client libraries. Since this is a Node.js project, we go to Node.js. And this is npm library. So let's add that library. So the command to add this. Okay, so while this downloads the library and saves it into the file, we'll move to the next step. So response time is the other library that we also need here, because it's just to make our work easier. It makes it easy to check the how long the server took to respond on a particular path. Let's install response time. So once we have those libraries installed, we need to tell our application to export metrics. I've already added the code. I had added the code and then I reversed it, so I'll just copy it back. Can you hold on for 2 minutes?
Sure.
Okay, so now we add, I'll copy this code and then I'll explain it.
Where did you copy it from? Is there a place where the user would be able to find an example?
No. So this is a commit on this project that I made a few days back while I was testing it out. So
Okay.
just to save time, instead of typing out all this, I'll copy it from my previous commit. Okay, so this is the Prometheus client that we just downloaded and saved. Then Prometheus has these data structures which you can use for metrics gathering. So they have the counter, the gauge, the summary, histogram. So here we'll use the summary, and this is the register where you register a metric. So I'll show how it's used. This is our new metric. So the name is Tanooki Responses MS. So the recommendation is that you prefix your metrics with the name of the application that it refers to, so that it's easy to identify metrics later. Then you add some help text and you add labels. This is a method to tell the Prometheus library to start collecting default metrics. So default metrics are stuff that every Node.js application has. Now this is the place where we collect how long our server took to respond to an API request. So here you're adding values into the summary that we created here. As you can see, the labels are also added. So you have the method, path, and status, which are taken from the request method URL, which is the path, and the status code. And the time, which is provided by the response time library, is an observation which is added to that summary. I hope I'm making sense here. Okay, then this is the place where the metrics path is added to the server. So as I was saying, we need our application to export metrics in a format that Prometheus accepts, and it's usually on this path /metrics. So we'll be using the same default path. Is there anything not clear here? Okay, I'll move ahead.
I think the only question is, if I'm a new user, how do I know that those are the things that I need to add? Is there documentation somewhere?
Sorry, the last bit I didn't catch.
I'm saying, is there
Documentation.
any documentation, but the code you just added? And how did you know how did you know to add this code? That's the question. Where can I go as a user?
Okay, so usually the best place is to look at the description of the library that you're using. So for example, I used the Node.js library. Usually in the README, there is examples for how you can use that library. So here, for example, it's showing you how to use it. So we've done something similar. Require prompt client, collect default metrics. We've created a registry as well. Here it shows you how to create each data structure, counters, gauges, histograms, and the one we are using, summary. So what you want to measure, that is something that you'll have to decide based on your application. But how to do it, usually you can find information about that in the description of the library that you're using.
Got it.
And most libraries are documented here in the Prometheus docs. So this is a good starting place.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so now that we've added this, this counts as a separate module in Node.js. Just adding this doesn't really do anything. We can see that here. We have the server running. Now, if we add metrics, there'll be nothing because, well, if you're familiar with Node.js, you still have to tell the server to serve up metrics on this route. So we'll do that now. This is the existing server code. So this is what we need to add. One is that we are loading the Prometheus module that we just created. Okay. Then we tell the application to use the response counters. So we'll add that here. If you remember, response counters was defined here. So this is where the metric actually gets measured, you could say, or observed. Then we tell the application to serve up the metrics endpoint. And we tell Prometheus to start collecting metrics. Okay. So we've loaded Prometheus. We've added the response counters method into the middleware. We've added the metrics route, and we've told Prometheus to start collecting metrics. So now there should be a metrics endpoint. Yeah. So all these here are the default metrics that, if you remember, we told Prometheus to collect default metrics. The only metric that we've added is Tanooki responses MS. That you can see right at the top, Tanooki responses MS. So right now there is nothing because we've not made any requests to the base route. which is this, after adding the metrics. So if you refresh also, it'll, oh, okay. Now we have metrics here. So you can add more by simply refreshing this. So now you have multiple requests. Okay, so let me just check if we need to add any more code. No, that should be it. Okay, so now that we have our application actually exporting metrics in the format that Prometheus likes, we need to tell Prometheus to collect these metrics. So for that, there are two methods. One method is documented in our documentation. Let me just show you that. Right, so one way is to add this file into your repository with whatever values you want. And when deploying, GitLab will pick up the values from here and use them. So we'll try this first, or I think it'll be better to try this first. Okay, so the other method is to add this variable into your CI/CD variables and add the appropriate value. So the value, I think, is not well documented, the kind of value that you need to add in order to have Prometheus collect metrics from your application. So we need to add this key with this value. So just to mention, this is under your project settings and CI/CD. And then you expand the variables section. So we have this variable set. And now we do a deployment. Before doing the deployment, I'll just show you how to open the managed Prometheus apps UI. So I'm currently using a Kubernetes cluster from a monitoring project. So we'll connect to this first. Then we'll list out all the pods. One of the pods should be the Prometheus server. Here it is. So if you take this pod name, Prometheus-server, and you put it in a port forward command. So here you have kubectl port-forward, then the pod name, and the port that you want to access on your local system, colon, the port on which Prometheus is served on the remote system. -n GitLab managed apps is simply the namespace. So here you can see that Prometheus server is available under the GitLab managed apps namespace. So that's why the -n flag is required. So now you run this, and now you should be able to access the Prometheus server from your local machine. Yeah. So this is now the Prometheus UI given by the Prometheus managed app, which is installed on that Kubernetes cluster. So let's check the targets. These are all default targets. Kubernetes nodes, Kubernetes pods, Kubernetes service endpoints. So here there's only one, the Prometheus endpoint. Once we run the pipeline, there should be a second one here, which is the application metrics that we just added. This will take a bit of time. So I hope everyone is clear about what I just showed, the Kubernetes port forward and Prometheus targets. Any questions about that?
I think it's clear. Maybe it's one as the CI job runs. Maybe you can explain a little bit about the environment that you have, GCP, the installation of Prometheus that you've done. So we'll make sure it's clear to everyone.
Sorry, can you repeat that? Environment and?
Yeah, I mean, so you have a Kubernetes cluster that is deployed on Google Cloud, right?
Yeah.
And you've installed Prometheus on that cluster using the GitLab Manage app. So
Right.
I just want to make sure that we have the right context for anyone else that is watching this video.
Okay. Okay, so I'll show the Kubernetes cluster. This cluster is created in GKE, and we've installed Helm Tiller because you require Helm before you can install any other app. Ingress is required to deploy the application, cert manager, so that we can use HTTPS, and of course Prometheus. Yeah. So out of these, only Prometheus is really relevant to this demo. I can also show you the environment logs, just something interesting. So this is a simple application which simply starts listening on port 5000 here. It doesn't have much logs. Let's check if this is done. So though you had asked about how someone knows what code to use to collect these metrics, so it can get complicated because even though you can find out the basics of how to collect the metrics from the library that you're using, sometimes it can get complicated to actually collect the value that you're interested in. So for example, here we are interested in a simple metric which shows how long a particular path the server takes to respond, right? So for example, this is pretty simple, but depending on what value you want to collect, it can sometimes get complicated to actually get that value. And that, I suppose, there's not really any documentation anywhere to help you with.
I guess for that you need to know the backend and front end of your application.
Yeah.
And know exactly what you want to collect.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so this has completed. Yeah. So now there should be a new target here. So as you can see right now, there's one. If we refresh this page, there should be two. Yeah. So it says down because it has simply not, it has not scraped it as yet. Oh, server returned 404. Let's hope it succeeds the next time. The default is that it scrapes every 60 seconds. Okay, I guess something is wrong. Ah, I'm sorry. We forgot to push the code change that we made. So these are the libraries that we added. And these are the code changes that we made. Right. Do you want me to create an MR for this? Just so that it's easier to see all the changes together?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. So these are all the changes that we made. Let's merge this.
Can you please paste a link to this MR into the chat? I will add it to the
Sure.
notes.
Okay, I'm not sure how to access the chat over here.
Okay, you can just send it to me later on Slack. That's also fine.
I think I have the notes here. Okay. Well, thanks, Nadia, for taking all these down.
Sure.
Just paste it
Thank
here.
you for walking us through the process. To me, it all seems very complicated.
Yeah, it actually
I
took
guess
me
it
quite a
is
bit of
too. Yeah.
yeah, it took me quite a bit of time to figure this out.
I also find it a bit complicated, but I'm gonna review the merge request and try to work a bit on it. Is there a simpler scenario in which this could be demoed? Maybe.
You mean adding a simpler metric?
No, maybe getting a feel for the whole application, the backend and the front end.
Okay.
Because I feel that maybe the business logic stood a bit in the way of understanding it for me. But I'm sure if I review your merge request, I will understand it better afterwards.
Okay. Try to explain now.
Could you please repeat?
This just
You're cutting out now.
sorry.
A little bit. It worked perfectly fine for the walkthrough though, so grateful for that.
Yeah. Let me check if my internet is back.
We can hear you good now. Or maybe not. No, we cannot hear you.
Dove, what do you think? Do you have any outstanding questions around the experience?
Not now, but we're not done yet. Yeah, let's wait for Reuben to be back.
Sorry again.
Yeah,
so
you're back.
Okay. Okay, so Andre, I was just saying, while we wait for this pipeline to finish, I can just maybe explain a bit about the Tanooki Inc. project. Would that help?
Yeah, I think so. If everyone would agree, and if you all would find this helpful.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I think the Tanooki Inc. project was first created as a easy way to generate Sentry errors. So if you see the UI, it has a button for generating errors, and it has a link to.
You want to share? We're not seeing.
Oh, sorry.
For sure.
Let me share my screen. Right. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So if you look at the UI, it has a button for generating errors, which generates Sentry errors, and these are just links, static links. So even this button does not hit the backend. It does not hit the server. It generates errors right on the front end and sends it to Sentry. So the only route that we have in this application is this, the base route, the root route. So what I've done here is I've added a metric to calculate the response time for that route. So this will probably be familiar to you, Andre. This is simply to calculate the response time for the root route. And we've told the server to use this here, response counters. Okay. So that's it. The application is a simple application to generate Sentry errors with only one route. And we are, in this demo, we've added a metric to track the response time for that one route. I hope this made things clearer.
Yeah, and if you had like multiple routes and like multiple buttons that will actually hit the backend, then you would require to add additional changes to your application to capture that specific action.
No, actually, no, because this should capture response time for any route that exists in the application, any except slash metrics. That's because we have explicitly excluded it. So basically, this has been added as a middleware. So any request, any route will go through it. So even if we add a new route tomorrow, that should also be tracked.
And we will see this in the slash metrics endpoint.
Yeah, yeah. So here you can see Tanooki responses MS. This is the metric that we added. So since it's a summary data type provides you with all these. So it provides you with quantiles. So this tells you, for example, this 6.9 milliseconds is the 50th percentile. So that's 50% of requests.
We lost him again.
Where did it cut out?
On the 15th percentile.
Okay, so these are all percentiles. So for example, the 50th percentile means that
share the UI, because when you got cut there.
Sure. Yeah. So everyone can see this? Okay.
Yes.
So the 50th percentile means that 50% of requests get a response within 6.9 milliseconds. So another common thing that is done when naming metrics is that you add the unit as a suffix to the metric name so that it's easy to see what the unit of the value is. Because otherwise, when you're looking at something like this, you don't really know what unit a value has. So here it has a millisecond unit. And as I was saying, you have percentiles here. Then this is the sum of all these values. And this is the count of the number of observations that have been made. So there have been 2 observations. And this is the sum of all these values. So similarly, you have all these for each different route. Actually, technically, it's for each different combination of labels. So for example, this is get the slash path and status 200. Then here you see method get path slash and status 304. Then this is a different path. Again, a different path. So this is what the summary data type gives you. If you use something like gauge and counter, it's much simpler. Okay, so the pipeline has finished. Let's check Prometheus. Yeah. So the new target is now up, which means that Prometheus has collected metrics from it at least once. So let's look at some values. Since we started our metric with Tanooki, we can simply type in Tanooki and see all the metrics which are available. So for example, this is the Tanooki responses MS metric. If we want to see just the slash path, we can do this. So you've got all the quantiles and the different status. Right now, there's only 200 status available. Okay, so let's add this to the project chart. Should we add it as a custom metric? That'll be easier.
Whatever, yeah, whatever you think is easier.
Okay, so this is the default dashboard. We'll add a custom metric so that it appears here. What would be a good y-axis label? Tests. Okay, so it's showing the response count for every single one. If I remember correctly, you can use you can put a label here and it should print the value of the label in the chart. So let's print path.
I think it's in the legend label, in the variable.
It's in the
You
legend
have to put, yes,
here.
yes. And you have to put curly braces
Okay.
around. If I remember correctly, the braces are double.
Oh, let's just put it here as well. Okay.
It
So
doesn't
these are
work
all
for
the
the Y label, though. Sorry.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's fine for now. So here you can see all the different paths for which Prometheus has collected metrics. And this is our application is now serving up its own metrics. Prometheus is collecting it, and GitLab is displaying a chart based on those metrics. So before I get to any questions, I'll show you the other method for telling GitLab to uh, telling the managed Prometheus to collect metrics from your application. So the other method is to add this file in your repository. We already have the .gitlab folder because it's used for dashboards and issue templates. So let's add a file here. And here we have to add the same value that we added into the variable in YAML format instead. Where is that? Yeah. So we'll remove this Helm upgrade extra hours, and we'll put that value here. So since this is YAML format, it'll have to be like this. There'll be a new deployment, and the target in Prometheus should remain. So this target should still be there after the pipeline finishes. So those are the two methods that I know of to tell the managed Prometheus to scrape your application. Any questions?
So Prometheus support like counter, gouge, and histogram, right? So if I wanted to collect the metric in a different way, where should I do this change?
Meaning you want to try using one of the other data structures to
Yes.
collect?
Yes, just show me where should we change that.
So for example, if you want to use a counter, say, so we would have to change here. So right now responses is a summary. So instead you would have something like this, counter, and you would have to have so you'll have a name, Tanooki, responses. This would be a counter, so there'll be no unit. Then similarly, you'll have a help. And if you have any labels that you want to define right at the start, you can define them here. That should be it. So similarly for a gauge, histogram, and of course you'll have to change how you collect it. So for example, for this counter, let's rename this. So for this counter, you would add your labels. Assuming you have no labels, you can just observe. Okay, so this is a counter, so there's no observation. I think the method is called increment. Let's verify in the README. Yeah, so INC, which stands for increment. So this should increment the response counter every time there's a request to any of the routes. Ideally, you would add a label of at least the URL so that you can differentiate. Otherwise, it will increment the same counter for any request. So for example, if you have two APIs, API A and API B, it will increment the same counter each time you hit either API. While if you add a label with the URL, it will create a different counter for each different possible label value, which is what we usually want. So yeah, this would be how you would add another data structure. Any other questions?
Not for me. I think it was very helpful, and I'm sure that other people that will watch this video will find it helpful as well. So thank you for doing that.
Sure, no problem.
Thanks. Yeah, that's also all on my part. I made lots of good notes, so I think Dove, it will be a good starting ground for us to start looking into it, looking for ways to improve the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think for now, just a quick improvement that I can think of is to add some documentation which says, for example, what kind of value you need to add into the auto deploy values file. Because the current documentation only tells you that you need to add this file, but it does not give you examples of what you can add into this file, or even what value you should give for this variable. So I think that's a low-hanging fruit that we can quickly add. So I'll open an MR for that.
Yeah, there is one already for that. I've opened it a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, okay. I can point you to that MR as well.
Sure, that'll be great.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. I think it's a wrap. Thanks so much, Reuben. Yeah. It was super helpful.
Sure, no problem.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.